All right, I'm gonna call this meeting to order. This is the 9th membership meeting of the Everett Station District Alliance. We were founded in June of 2017. We do 2 membership meetings a year. We've done 4 years. We're in our 5th. And so welcome to the 2021 semi-annual membership meeting. And we're open, half of us, because there's another 30 people with us and they're online. And we were, I don't know if everybody has arrived yet. We're about 18, I guess, here. So welcome to our first open meeting and our first ever virtual and open live meeting of the organization. I don't see Sheldon here. Is he online or is he coming to?
He's gonna be in and out. He's actually cooking pizza right now for another event. So he's jack of all trades today.
All right, well, we're very happy for Sheldon. He is one of our board members for the Everett Station District Alliance and the manager of this hotel. And he moved here from the East in December of 2019, just 2 months before COVID. So he's had an interesting journey here, figuring out how to navigate the operation of a hotel. And just since I talked to him a week or so ago about what room we were going to be in, I see that he has bumped us from the room we were going to be in because he's got a square dancing event happening in his hotel. And so he's a happy guy, and I'll reintroduce him when he comes in. But we want to thank Sheldon for donating this space to the Everett Station District Alliance for this event. So we're going to call him our sponsor for the semi-annual meeting today. We have a packed program. We, in just a minute, are due to welcome Garry Clark, the new Executive Director, CEO of the Economic Alliance of Snohomish County, who is very interested in the work that we are doing and looking for exactly how he will interface the Economic Alliance of Snohomish County with the Everett Station District Alliance. We'll have a State of the District report from our Executive Director, Brock Howell. We've formed a safety forum for the Smith Avenue area, which has been a challenging area for this district for many years now. And Jennifer will give an update on that work. Amy King is the founder and Executive Director of the Pallet, an organization that builds pallet shelters, and we're going to have the first pallet shelter in Snohomish County coming up here shortly in our neighborhood. And then our representative from our community to Sound Transit, Paul Roberts, City Council member, will give us some updates on what's happening with the Sound Transit planning as we go forward. So, do we have Garry Clark connected?
He's on. We have a couple of more intro slides for you.
Okay, so let's go through those. So here's, we have a full slate, 15 slots for our board of directors. All the slots are now filled. We have Brock Howell as our executive director and Jennifer Cowell here navigating us through this meeting. Having just completed 1 year as a VISTA volunteer in our community, working with ESDA, and re-enrolled for a 2nd year. So Jennifer, thank you for, you're gonna have 1 year of helping us through the COVID period and 1 year of helping us through the live period. So thank you. Next slide. Our membership, we've been kind of slow on doing the outreach for membership, but we're at about 40 members, and here's the list of all the names. There are quite a few are coming in now daily as we're doing our membership drive. Next slide. We have some great sponsors that have been supporting the work of the organization. Here you can see the list of those. Many are businesses in the community and stakeholders and supporters as well. Next slide. So we are to the point of inviting Garry Clark to share a little self-introduction. I've gotten to meet him. He brings a lot of great talent and experience to our community from other places in the country where he's worked and in the economic development and to some degree housing arena. He's been on board just a short time, is out and about learning about our community, asking questions and sharing his thoughts and determining how he would begin to see the Economic Alliance moving forward in our community. So with that introduction, Garry, I'm going to turn the mic, or I'm not sure exactly how to say this, Mike, over to you. You've got the floor, and welcome to the semi-annual meeting of the Everett Station District Alliance. Garry.
Thank you, Ed. She had me when she was 19, young African-American queen, skin held melanin tight like the river Nile. She started out uptown next door to the Harvard Street hustlers, busters hollering at her backside while she carried her 2 kids to a bus ride. So am I a hustler or a husker? Pops traveled through cocaine surpluses and peacemaker rallies, got smoked by herb near the alley, running through streets like track meets from Cardozo High to the Valley. But this hustling life ain't free, and all the dope fiends would holler, Ricky! See, I come from a long line of slaves who wouldn't stop running for freedom. Got whipped by the whip so bad, the master felt bad and freed them. So am I a hustler or a husker? She called it quits after having 6 kids straight near the Tobacco Road, looked at Henry and said, who needs them? Bled through the world with a heart so big, her 4-foot frame freed them, while a cop held a loaded gun and screamed, Ricky, who needs them? See, it's a tricky life they led, from rural roots to an urban scene, and you wonder why their American life is a dream. Vera May found herself with sugar and near death, whispered in his ear, I love you, and sent them to college in the heartland with all she had left. I remember the burial as if it never left. Grandpa Hip said, don't take no wooden nickels, but take everything else. Almost missed my flight waiting on an addicted driver. Didn't have any money for luggage, but Pop said, son, you're a survivor. So am I a hustler or a husker? I seldom know the truth, but I know my urban legend helped to free my rural roots. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Garry Clark. I am the president and CEO, thank you for the hands, folks, of Economic Alliance Snohomish County. And I always like to present initially with a little spoken word when I can. So that's a little bit about my story and a brief intro there. So Economic Alliance Snohomish County, I'm really excited about the conversation I had with Ed a few days ago. I'm also excited about some of the work that he shared with me. From my vantage point, EASC, Economic Alliance Snohomish County, is poised to do some great work in partnership with folks like you. In order for us to be successful, we need to do the work collaboratively. And so in my first few months, we've talked about expanding our pillars of work. And so briefly, I just want to share what we're doing. In that conversation, we're talking about advocacy, government relations work, making sure that we are providing that information and that service to our businesses, being that voice to amplify their work. Secondly, we are still pushing hard to make sure that business retention and expansion efforts are seminal to our work. And that means that we realize that the entrepreneurial business that starts up in Snohomish County can grow and expand, but also the recruited company can do the same. And we have to continue to communicate with them. So we have a goal of reaching a certain number of businesses every year. Chamber and small business work is actually the core function of who we are. It's how EASC became EASC, was the collection of 3 other entities. So our work has to continue there with events and opportunities, and it looks like people in the room there are actually in person and hanging out. And that's really our goal, is to get back to that. Workforce, obviously you all have heard the tremendous need for some additional assistance there from all industries and walks of life. And so our job is to help, again, to partner with Workforce Snohomish County and other groups to make sure that we are solidifying that work. Business attraction is obviously one of the tenets of our work at EASC. So we'll continue to look to promote not only business, but people who want to be here and thrive in Snohomish County. And last but not least, we just added a new pillar to our work, and that pillar is quality of life. And that includes housing, DEI work, and several other components. One to mention would be nonprofit organizations, and another would be education, daycare, childcare. So those are some of the key pillars that we've rolled out. And later this year, we'll be coming back with what we call our investor campaign, which is not simply about raising funds. It's more so about showing our ROI for our investors and our county partners. And so we want to make sure that we bring metrics to our work. Also, our goals need to have sustainable achievements. But all in all, folks, my thinking and my leadership perspective is more of a holistic economic development perspective. And so in having that conversation, if we're recruiting companies, we also want to make sure that we are talking about place-based development, that we're talking about the impact of one business to the rest of our community and county. And so housing becomes a seminal piece in that work. I've done housing work in the Nebraska territory and also in the Washington, D.C. area, and creating a revolving loan fund for a countywide effort. That rings true to me as an opportunity for Snohomish County as well. We ended up raising a $5.5 million revolving loan fund in my previous stop for workforce housing, to break down the silos of housing so that we're not just talking about one end of it, but merging those together. So in my last minute with you all, I'd just like to say, I'm very thankful for the opportunity to collaborate with you all. We are currently adding staff as we speak and adjusting things. We are rolling out a new brand this summer as well. So come to that event when you see it. And please, please reach out to me if there's anything I can do or learn from you all about Snohomish County and the work you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary, and I appreciate so much your squeezing us into your very busy schedule. And I know you had a conflict and you were willing to insert into that a few minutes for this meeting today. And we very much look forward to a conversation about how we can collaborate going forward. So thank you, Gary. Now, our next agenda item is the State of the District report from our Executive Director, Brock Howell.
Thank you, Ed. I'm not sure Ed Peterson introduced himself at the beginning, and so I saw something pop up in the chat as we went. Ed Peterson, our president of our board, just did our intro. So thank you so much, Ed. I'm going to provide a quick update as to both what we've been doing as an organization and what's happening in our neighborhood over the last 6 months. And so I'm going to touch on our work programs, clean and safe, neighborhood and business development, preparation, organization, and then our priorities for the next 6 months. And just to make sure, oh yeah, I forgot, I can't control the slides. Just make sure everybody's grounded here, or for the future posterity of somebody out on YouTube. Our neighborhood is roughly on the north end, Hewitt South 44th Street, on the west Broadway, and on the east side I-5 and the railroad tracks. Really thinking about the future of Everett Station specifically and what that means to our neighborhood. And so, you know, there's a couple of geographies as we think through, but we just, that's a particular grounding. You can also see downtown's outline. This is not the exact BIA outline for Downtown Everett Association, but that's roughly the location for that. So one of the things that we did over the last couple of months was to dig into the data of, what is happening in terms of crime in our neighborhood. It was a big request from our property owners to look at it. And the city of Everett has an open data platform of where we can pull that data and look through it. And we're just starting on this work to look at what the data is. And it's going to be really hard for you to see it both in person on this screen and also probably online. But I just want to note a couple of things. So you can see there's, shows reported crimes. So this is not actual criminal, this is not cases per se, this is just incident reports that come into the police department and then get reported by the police. And you can see there's a general downward trajectory over at least the crimes that have been selected, which is pretty, actually, basically all of them. If we can go to the next slide. So this is a little backwards because I should have started with this one. Because this is a little bit more all-encompassing, and then on the previous slide I pulled out a few. So you can see there's a couple that are driving the numbers pretty big, which includes just a suspicious event or a security check. And so when you pull those out, as the previous slide showed, you can see that there's a little ebb and flow through, but a general downward trajectory in terms of incident reports. Now, I also got asked, well, what is it like month to month? So we can track it month to month to see, where are the trends going? And so the next chart shows that for incident reports. And this is really too much for the screen here. But you can see there is some seasonal variability. And if we go to the next slide. Yep.
Can you at least tell us what the two axes are?
So let's start, let's go with this one because it's a lot easier. Are we already back to let's stay on the month, yeah. So on this chart, we have starting in January 29 to June 2021. So the last 2.5 years. And you can see the monthly variability as you go through. And this particular year, there were more incident reports that started to pick up in February, and March, and April, which also happens to, there's a lot of tension happening in our community happening at that time. So I don't think that's a big surprise to anybody that we started to see those reports pick up in that time period.
The numbers on the left go up to? And
the numbers on the left go up to 60. So the high point is, I don't know the exact number, but it's probably like 63. 62 incident reports for that time period. Now, again, this is only one snapshot. It's not a complete picture, doesn't tell the complete story. So there's another set of data from the from Everett Police Department. That is, what are the cases? And this is by year. So on the left there is, I believe, 2015. And then going to 2021. And obviously we're only halfway through the year. And so we're exceeding the rate right now in 2021 than 2020, but generally still probably lower than 2019. And you see the case rate has been going down over that time period. If you go to the next slide. So this is again the month to month, again, starting with 2015 all the way to 2021. Again, the range on the top end is 60 cases. There's going to be fewer cases than incident reports, so that shouldn't be a surprise there. If we go to the next slide, we can again look at the January 2019 to June 2021. Obviously, we're not all the way through June. And again, the cases picked up in February and in March of this year. We are going to continue to refine this data and have it as a dashboard on our website so people can dig into it. You can also dig into it if you want and you're like technically savvy. You can build your own dashboards using the city's information, and it's publicly available. So that's one thing we're continuing to work on. Next thing I want to highlight is we have our speaker a little later that's going to talk about the Smith Avenue Pallet project, but the Everett Gospel Mission and the city of Everett have entered into a partnership to provide 21 shelters, pallet shelters behind the Everett Gospel Mission. that are hopefully opening this coming month. And they're just going through the final permitting process right now with a decision from the land use hearing officer, I believe on January 28th or January 30th, depending on the public comment that came in. June, not January, June, thank you. Tied to that with the city council's adoption was the no sit, no lie ordinance. This is a map of the coverage area, which was roughly 41st Street to Pacific, and then excluding Broadway for the most part. The Everett Station District Alliance supported both the pallet shelters and the no sit, no lie ordinance as critical tools to make sure people have a home and to make sure that we are starting to address some of the criminal activity that was happening, as you can see from the data that was coming up. It is tied to the implementation of the pallet shelter, so it will both start and sunset with the pallet shelter project. The other thing that we did around cleaning and safety is we entered into the Adopt a Street program that the city has for Smith Avenue. And we've done one volunteer day so far, collected, I believe, 44 bags of trash and a whole bunch of hypodermic needles. You can see our coverage area map, our little simple map on the right there of where we went. We went beyond Smith Avenue during our volunteer day to be able to clean up. And we hope to continue to do that, but we recognize that we are a small organization with a limited number of volunteers. And so we are only committed right now to Smith Avenue. Our next event will be in July with a date to be announced. And finally, Jennifer helped us expand our initial on-street parking restrictions proposal that we had developed in 2019. And so in 2019, we had created a plan for area south of 33rd Street and west of the tracks. And we had promised at the time that we would expand the proposal to the rest of the neighborhood. So that way we have a consistent application of parking restrictions across the entire neighborhood. And so Jennifer diligently audited every street and talked with every property owner she could and put together and refined this proposal, which we submitted to the city for their consideration. And that's one of the things we'll continue to work on over the next few months, is just the continue to work with the city to see if this is potential for actual adoption. All right, next program area is neighborhood and business development. I just want to highlight a few things happening in the neighborhood with this. First, we had the topping out of Compass Health's first phase of their development. We have a new Bath Plus coming in. You can see the purple dot up there in Cedar in Pacific. And then of course, we have the Kaiser Permanente expansion that's happening. I don't have a rendering for it, so you don't get to see what it looks like. But we're excited for that to continue to break. There's all sorts of work happening, but to see it continue to grow. We also built a new business directory on our website to highlight our businesses that are in the neighborhood and also break them down by their sectors so people can see them, and then if they want to find them. One of our strengths in our neighborhood is our construction industry. We have a number of retail and manufacturing businesses within construction, and it's going to be great to continue to be able to highlight them. This is a work in progress. If you like to be listed, if you like your information updated, please let us know. And then we will be building this out in a little bit more useful tool. Finally, I want to highlight our winning ways in this neighborhood, or slightly outside of our neighborhood. Big, our sports teams are just right on the edge of our neighborhood. And Everett Aqua Sox are currently 22-14, leading their league. The Seattle Storm are 11-2. We get to be the home for them this year. And our Silvertips were the champions at 18-4. So even during the pandemic, we've been champions here. All right, preparation. There's kind of a reframing of the planning work that we've been doing, but is really thinking about that we know change is coming, and so we got to prepare for it. Some of those things include the SD3 extension of light rail, the Metro Everett plan adopted in 2018, and the current planning work for the Housing Action Plan. So the work that we have done over the last few years include the 2017 recommendations for a neighborhood transformation report, the feature concepts report, which our previous VISTA member helped put together, and then this past year, the convergence study, which we have just published, and there is a very limited edition set of hard copies. Like this might be the only one. Not true, but it's close to that. And so I'm going to highlight some of the work that we've done on the convergence study over the last few months. Our main role in this work has been around community engagement. We are the neighborhood organization. We have the relationships with stakeholders. So we wanted to make sure that our stakeholders were involved in the process of having input into the report. Housing Hope started the report with funding from the Department of Commerce and JP Morgan Chase Foundation to look at how can we catalyze development, how can we do a project in the neighborhood, for one, for having administrative offices, our early childhood learning, potentially affordable housing for a project. And then as we had conversations with the city, it was clear that it would also be important to think about what is the potential for the city and what they could do with their properties too. So a report was commissioned to look at those things, and we were involved in terms of making sure our stakeholders were there. We had more than 200 stakeholders participate through 10 technical work groups, 3 equity committees, public official briefings, 3 open houses. So lots of engagement. And you can, on this chart, this pie chart kind of just shows the who was at the table during the process. The report published here finds that there's a great opportunity for creating a neighborhood hub of green, equitable, and employment-focused economic development, and that the catalyst development can protect and stabilize local business, accelerate economic development, enable housing choice, achieve climate action goals, and leverage real estate values to create civic value. And a concept of what that could look like on the 2 sites that were analyzed was developed by the consultants. This information is on our website now. I'm not going to go through it in detail in terms of like how all these pieces fit together. But if we can go to the next slide, there are 5 key steps for implementation. And again, this is on our website, but I want to highlight the first step, which is updating city plans and policies to support existing local light industrial and manufacturing businesses and promote new economy employment in the station neighborhood. And so there's a couple of like just starting strategies to making sure that we're preparing our neighborhood for the change that is happening. So that way everybody can be involved in the success moving forward. And that includes looking at how do we create a land use framework that protects the light industrial businesses from that pressure that might happen, creating a freight master plan, and revising some of the code, the Metro Everett code, to making sure that industrial uses can be on the ground floor on some of the parcels that exist. And we think that will help us transition to really a great transit-oriented development of where people can both work and live in this neighborhood, where there are the amenities to be able to walk and bike to transit, as well as have that job and be able to have economic growth here. So. All right, I'm going to go briefly over some organizational stuff. This is our profit and loss budget versus actuals from May. We will have our quarterly report in July after June is done. I'm actually just going to hold it here. I know it's going to be hard for the folks in the audience to see it on the screen, but hopefully at least people online can sit through it. All right.
You can like pinch out and expand it.
No.
Fair enough.
Can we go to the, and then we're going to do the same for the balance sheet for a second.
The essence of it is that we are paying our bills. It's a dramatically shrunk budget from what it was before COVID. It's a shoestring budget in a lot of ways for all of the activities that are shown in Brock's report that we want to work on, and that we are looking hard at a financial model for sustainability. Meanwhile, we are holding it together and retaining our staffing plan through some creative activity.
I'm not sure we want to use the word creative in financial documents, but by creative, mostly that means, actually, if we go to the budget here for a second and we'll leave it and I'll talk. Folks online probably couldn't hear what Ed was saying, so I'll just maybe hit a couple of points. We are not, one of the big things that we had expected starting actually in 2020 was start to have revenue from a business improvement area. And we haven't had that. In part because the pandemic hit and we decided not to push it any farther with the city council of additional action that needed to happen there. Because of the pandemic, we did have the opportunity to get some of the federal assistance to be able to continue to staff our organization and be able to carry forward. Obviously, that's going to quickly come to an end here. And I've been in a state of flux with that federal funding of being very, very part-time to being funded when the PPP dollars are available. So that's just kind of the basic accounting. And we will be shifting over the next 6 months back to the very, very temporary position of where I'm part-time again, back with the position. So go to the next slide. So priorities over the next 6 months. With the Clean and Safe program, we're going to continue with the Adopt a Street program of using our volunteers to clean up Smith Avenue. And we have a commitment under the program to clean it at least 2 more times this year. So it's not a big deal. You know, what we would really like is to be able to be out there every day, but we're not, that's not a volunteer effort. I showed you the crime dashboard, and we're going to continue to improve that and be able to make that more useful for property owners to see what's happening. We've had the Smith Avenue Safety Forum, and Jennifer is going to talk about this a little bit more, Jennifer Cross. Neighborhood business development, we're going to keep winning sports games. And we're going to continue to make that business directory a little bit more useful online. And then in terms of preparation, there's a lot to prepare for in this community. Certainly, we need to take next steps with a convergence study. And the city's housing action strategy is one vehicle for some of that to get implemented, as well as the coming comprehensive plan update. We, in 2019, were successful with the city in securing almost $2 million for a pedestrian bike improvement project from the Everett Station to the arena. And the city says it will have engineering or design documents out later this year. So we'll be working with the city to make sure it reflects what we had put together earlier. And then there's the SD3 conversation, and Councilmember Roberts will be talking about that in a moment. And that's really critical to the future of our neighborhood. And then in terms of our organization, we continue to need to fund this organization at a full staffing capacity, as well as grow our programs. And so we're continuing to, get our $25 memberships in, try to expand our sponsorships and grant funding, and then beginning to have the conversation with property owners whether they have the interest of establishing that business improvement area for long-term sustainable funding for our organization. So with that, maybe I'll take a pause. We do have a little bit of time. Oh, yep. Where? And is it Christina?
Yes, that's me.
Yep.
I just wanted to make a small correction to what you said about the Wall Street connector, the connection to the arena. We are scheduled to begin design this year. We won't have design documents for review. We're scheduled for construction in 2023. So design will continue through 2022. Just a small correction to that.
Yeah, that's a good, yep, it'll start this year. I don't know if everybody caught that in the room. I don't know if everybody caught it online either, because I can't quite figure out the volume difference. Just to be clear for everybody, the Station to Arena project with Christina is the project manager for. She is starting the design work this year, but she's not going to finish the design work this year. Does anybody have questions online, Q&A? We have, or here? Yeah.
Hi, so I'm curious how you guys make lobbying decisions, or if you have legislative priorities or lobbying priorities. So you mentioned the no sit, no lie ordinance and the pallet shelter that you supported both. How did you guys make that decision? Is that a board decision or membership, or how do you set those priorities?
Really good question. So the question for those online was, how do we make decisions around legislative priorities? And especially with the no sit, no lie ordinance. And certainly it was a hard question to bring up, right? It came up pretty quickly for us as an organization. We heard about it pretty late in the process in terms of when we thought. So we ended up making our official board decision, I believe 2 days before the city council meeting where it is relevant. And so the timeline was pretty compressed for us. So it was a board decision. It was a major decision. So we elevated, it wasn't a staff decision. It was elevated up to the board. We held, because of the timing of our board meetings, we ended up having to call a special board meeting for making that decision. And so we had to send out notice to all of our board members that a special meeting was being called. And then I believe we had, I think it was nearly all 14 board members at the time there to discuss it. And it was a unanimous vote. So
basically, process-wise, any policy issue or advocacy issue comes to the board for decision-making. We really want these 2 membership meetings a year to be a place where issues of importance to the neighborhood can be brought forward and then scheduled for discussion and action by the board. But it's a board decision. No advocacy happens without board approval.
yeah. We took a deliberate approach for this, of which I know lots of people spoke before city council. So I know lots of people didn't agree necessarily with the position ESDA took on it, but in terms of our membership, when I communicated out the timeline for making the decision, that it wouldn't just be like a gut reaction yes, we had a fair number of property owners who were very frustrated with us for not taking action immediately. But we have a deliberate process, and we took it through the right channels of going to the board and making sure that it was scheduled for a decision.
The comment I'd make is that the data collection is relatively new, and it comes about as a partly as a byproduct of the Pallet project and the no sit, no lie. So what we want to do is get some metrics in place that help us understand where we are and what's happening over time as activities are implemented. We see the Pallet project and no sit, no lie is a 1-year demonstration project, and we really want to try to measure what the results are from that. And you saw the high crime data for the 4 years from 2015 to 19, and then it dropped. And that drop was largely during the COVID period. And so what we don't want is it to go back up to where it was. So we're looking at how do we track meaningful data to understand how our community is doing on crime prevention and dealing with the criminal activity that's been rampant in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
Councilmember Vogel
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
Would this be the forum to have not communication, but discussions with business owners, with the people on the streets, with the city, with all the stakeholders essentially, so that we can really start working together to figure out what we actually need? Because I know there are serious issues in this area, and a lot of it, some of it had to do with COVID, like no bathrooms, but I know that the business owners don't necessarily need people to get arrested, right? But they need something to happen. So coming together to figure out what kind of policies can be created so that the no sit, no lie won't be necessary. So is this, you only meet twice a year, but
Yeah.
is there more that can happen? And maybe now is not the time to ask that
No,
question?
no, I think that now's the time to ask the question. Like, we don't have all the right stakeholders in the room right now. Like,
Right.
There's a few others that should be here. But let me reiterate the question and also follow up on Ed's comment so everybody can hear Ed's comment. So Councilmember Vogel asked, what is the right forum to be able to, and if this is the right forum to have the conversation between property owners and a whole set of other stakeholders about comprehensively addressing homelessness, crime, for some folks, economic prosperity, but every issue that you could think of. And the answer to that, I would say, is yes. This is the right organization to have those conversations. We certainly can schedule time during our meetings to be able to have those conversations, and we do for our board meetings. And most importantly, at some point soon, I need to hand this over to Jennifer Cross, who is our leader of the Smith Avenue Safety Forum. And that is the exact right group to be able to have that conversation, to be able to address it. And to maybe go back to what Ed's statement, and I'm just going to say something in addition for folks online, which is, we didn't just take a stance in support of only the Pallet shelters and the no sit, no lie ordinance. We took a stance in support of comprehensive reform and funding for addressing homelessness and for treating people with dignity on the street and being able to use the co-op program appropriately to be able to get people the services they need. And our comprehensive view is such that we'd be hopeful that we wouldn't be criminalizing people living in the city. So, we are definitely looking forward to looking at what Ed was saying regarding the data to figure out, what is working, what's not working. As I showed the data dashboard, you're not going to glean a ton necessarily from just the data, though. A lot of it is going to be based off of the anecdotal experiences that we're having and being able to have conversations about how to move forward in a principled way and thinking globally for the county. I don't mean globally around the earth, I just mean globally for the county. So that is our hope. And because we passed that resolution as an organization, we as staff are empowered to go advocate for funding enough housing for everyone in the county, right? So that action is going to put us in a better place for future discussions around housing in homelessness, in crime, and getting people the services they need. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Yeah, I think Jennifer, are we ready?
Yeah.
All right, so Jennifer Cross is our chair of two similar groups, the Smith Avenue Safety Forum and our board committee, the Smith Avenue Committee. And so she's going to highlight the work that the forum and committee have done over the past few months.
Awesome. Thanks, Brock. Can you guys hear me okay? It's kind of weird to be a floating head in space.
We can hear you very well.
Okay, perfect. So I'll give you a little bit of background about what we've been up to and kind of what the hope is going forward. So I was approached, I want to say it was February, although this whole year is sort of blending into a giant lump. So by Brock, the Smith Avenue Safety Forum was established by the ESDA as a way for business owners to get more involved in the conversations around the concerns about safety. So the first meeting was set by Brock, and Brock facilitates all of the meetings going forward, which I really appreciate because I don't know anything about technology. So we had our first meeting. I want to say there were probably 20 or so businesses in attendance, and just talked about, you know, what are your concerns as business owners in our area? And it was pretty standard, the same answers that have been given over the years, that everybody's just worried about safety and worried about the balance between needs of people who are peacefully living on the street in our neighborhood and a part of the fabric of our neighborhood, and the crime that all of us are experiencing. And at that time, as you saw from the metrics that Brock had showed, the crime was really spiking in our area. So business owners were feeling really quite concerned about the viability of doing business and also the appearance and look of our neighborhood, because as a business owner, it's not just, you know, the appearance of the neighborhood is very important. So it was really illuminating, even for me as a business owner, to hear how much others are struggling. I was really excited because there were members of the city there, members of the police force there, and this just sort of kicked off this idea that we would have a place where people could go and hear anecdotal or grassroots experiences of what it's like to run a business down on Smith Avenue and try to balance the challenges of the safety concerns with wanting to have a super inclusive neighborhood. So fortuitously, at that meeting was right when the ESDA had found out about the Pallet projects and the proposed no sit, no lie. And that really kicked off a very strong grassroots efforts by all of the businesses in the area to weigh in about these ordinances before they got passed. So we did a lot of communication amongst ourselves. We did a lot of communicating with the city council and the mayor. And it was a great opportunity to have all of us be able to come together and organize very quickly and make sure that our point of view was heard before this important decision was made. So that is what we're hoping for from this group, is that it just becomes a way for business owners to work together, communicate concerns. If there are certain types of activities spiking in the neighborhood, it's a really easy, quick way for us to communicate amongst each other. Hey, this happened, keep your eyes out. I hope it becomes kind of a neighborhood watch type feel where we all just sort of have each other's backs and are communicating well, because, you know, things get reported to the police and it's important to be able to look at all of the data, but that doesn't help me pluck out what might be really applicable to me. Oh, and I should mention, I own the dog spot down on 3512 Smith. So I am right in the heart of the Smith Avenue area. So we have had a meeting once a month since February. We had Captain Fudge come on as a guest and speak with us as business owners about ways that we could help coordinate with the police on safety, what to report, how to report, what the numbers are, who the important contacts are. That was very helpful just in terms of reiterating that reporting things is really important. So as a business owner, sometimes it can be hard to determine what's important enough to call about. And according to Captain Fudge, absolutely everything is important to call about because that is what helps determine what the patrols and things are going to be like. So it's important as a business owner to just be aware of how we can make the best impact in the neighborhood in terms of safety. So that was very helpful. We also had a meeting where members of the city came and went over the different crime database options with us. And that's what led to coordination with the city by Brock and Ed to be able to pull up some of the nice data that we now have and to work towards getting some sort of a tracking system for when the pallet shelters actually open. Because we are very interested as business owners in the community in finding a workable solution that takes everyone into consideration. So we're really hoping that the pallet projects will be extremely successful, that we can demonstrate that the no sit, no lie in combination with the pallet structure makes it so that people have a safe place to go and businesses also have a safe neighborhood that they can do business in. We're hoping to be able to influence pallet structures going into other neighborhoods if this winds up being a good solution, but we need tracking for that. So we're looking forward to moving forward with that. And then we also use the forum for business owners to be able to report when they've had an incident. And I want to encourage any business owners that are here today to use the forum as a way to report. If you have something happen, there's a really easy form that you can just get on there, fill out, and that way all the rest of the business owners in the area can see what you've experienced and we can all be aware and we can have a little bit more anecdotal tracking on what happens in the neighborhood, because the crime data does not always reflect my personal experience about what might be actually going on around the dog spot at any time. So having another way to have a record of that, we hope will be helpful in figuring out how to move the neighborhood forward. And that's where we're at right now, I think. Did I miss anything, Brock?
That was great. Does anybody have any questions about what the Smith Avenue Safety Forum is doing? Or for council member?
How can I go to one of those forum meetings?
Is that council member Vogely?
Yes.
I was just gonna, I should have ended by saying, council member, let's get together. You can email Brock and Brock can add you to our roster. And you can also get in touch with me directly. And I would be super excited to have some conversation with you. One of the things that was really interesting when the no sit, no lie challenge was happening was we had a lot of advocacy groups weigh in from a lot of different areas. And we tried to be very vocal as the business members in the area that we are not interested in just passing the no sit, no lie, and then leaving it alone. We're interested in being involved in the conversation about how to improve the state of homelessness in our area entirely. We are not interested in a neighborhood where we don't coexist. We want to be part of a larger solution. So I am hopeful that that can happen. And it sounds like you and I would be a really good team together. So
Yeah, I like that. Teamwork.
yeah.
Jennifer, I believe we have a meeting next Friday, right? Maybe?
We'll take it off.
I think
I
so.
have a meeting? Do I have a meeting next Friday? I don't think so.
I think our next meeting of the Smith Avenue Safety Forum is next Friday. So we will make sure that.
Oh, yes. I do have a meeting next Friday.
Yeah. So maybe we can connect for that.
That would be great.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and we look forward to continue to have that be a success for us. With that, we have Amy King, the CEO and founder of Pallet, which is the creator of the pallet shelters that are being implemented behind the Everett Gospel Mission, and has amazing projects all across the US right now, but is based here in Everett in terms of manufacturing. So Amy is coming in live from Hawaii. So aloha.
Aloha.
And I'm just going to turn it over to you. And then if you
Okay.
need to share your screen or anything, you should be able to do that.
Great. Let me do that now. Let's see. Get the right view here. Can you see that all right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am currently on the island of Oahu and very grateful to be with my family, celebrating the start of summer and taking a break, but I'm very grateful to be joining you and sharing more about Pallet and what we do. As a little bit of a background, I am a local Northwest girl. I grew up in Edmonds, and my husband grew up in Los Angeles. Between the two of us, we have founded 3 companies in the Northwest region, with our focus being primarily on increasing housing supply across the spectrum, everything from shelters, which you'll see here today. And I know many of you have already heard my pitch, so I apologize for you having to hear it again. But everything from shelters to permanent housing and everything in between. That's what we're passionate about, is increasing housing supply. We're also very passionate about workforce development, especially as it relates to marginalized populations, and specifically those that are exiting the criminal justice system, addiction recovery programs, and homelessness in and around the Northwest region. So this picture here to kick this off, this is our site in Santa Clara. This site opened last Christmas for homeless families. As you can see, this site is entirely powered by solar systems through a partner that we work with in California called Box Power. So it is a completely off-grid property that houses about 75 men, women, and children that are experiencing homelessness there. And it's been a very successful site for us. So as I mentioned, a little bit of background about us. Pallet was created specifically with the intent of building safe, dignified personal shelter for people experiencing homelessness. We created and designed these shelters with constant input, and we still receive input from our staff who have lived experience in homelessness. So these are not just our staff on the floor. We have staff in positions of leadership on the board, in executive seats, that have lived experience with homelessness, and they make decisions and they drive our design and our implementation of our product. More than 80% of our staff come from a system impacted background, like I mentioned before. And what we offer at Pallet from an employment perspective is opportunities for people to learn manufacturing. We have life skills training as well. We have community volunteers that come into our facility, or at least pre-COVID and post-COVID they will, and they teach things like financial literacy, parenting, anger management, everything you can imagine. We have healthcare professionals that come on site and offer mental health services, all kinds of stuff for our staff and for those individuals who are interested. And also all of our employees make living wages, have full benefit packages and 401k plans so that they can generate wealth and move on and up in life. As I mentioned, we have 2 other sister organizations. Weld Seattle is our nonprofit organization. Weld provides housing in the Seattle area, utilizing vacant developer properties through a piece of legislation called the Vacant Property Legislation that I wrote in connection with the Seattle City Council members back in 2016, maybe? I don't know, time's fine. And we have been utilizing vacant properties, housing about 150 people a year in congregate community clean and sober housing. That program, we also have an employment program, called Weld Works, and we place about 30 to 50 people a day across King County in jobs with employers that are interested in trying out our second chance employment model. We provide consultative services to them to do so, and we place employees on a contract basis and encourage those employers to pick them off as permanent employees. There's no placement or headhunter fee for them to do so, and we continue to support the employee in their recovery and rehabilitation for a year after placement. And then finally, Weld next year will be opening Seattle's first ever collaborative reentry resource center in connection with about 10 to 15 other nonprofit and community-based organizations in the Seattle area. We are very excited about that project. And Weld is entirely run all the way from the executive director down by staff with lived experience with the criminal justice system, addiction recovery, and homelessness. They have a less than 3% recidivism rate. National average is 77, and they have an 11% relapse rate, and the national average is in the 60s, 60%, somewhere above that. So the magic sauce of that program and what they do is that it is entirely run by people with lived experience. I'm a big believer in them building the programs and the effective services that are needed to effectively change sustainably people's course through homelessness and addiction. And then finally, we have another sister organization called Square Peg Construction. It's now based out of Everett as well, but builds properties all over the Puget Sound region, permanent product, apartments, single family homes, townhomes, things like that. And again, more than 80% of our staff in that entity are individuals that are system impacted that have interest in the construction trades. So trying to grow that construction workforce and provide living wage, gainful employment job opportunities for people in your neighborhood. So if you watch the animation here, hopefully you guys can see that. You can see the shelter coming together. It literally comes together just about that fast, not quite that fast, but this is sped up obviously. But for more than 500,000 people facing homelessness across America today, we feel like we need a durable, portable, dignified shelter solution that's scalable. So we started manufacturing these products with the intent of having a scalable, successful solution that's cost effective and easy to use for cities across America to quickly and effectively resolve homelessness in their communities. Right now, Pallet creates about 50 of these shelters a week. We are in the process right now of expanding capacity to 100 shelters a week. And over the next few months in preparation for storm season, we will be tripling our capacity. So we will be hiring if you know anyone that's looking for a job. But we are also utilize our shelters for disaster response following large storms. So we're about to get really busy here. So a couple of things for you to be aware of about our shelters. They are quick and easy to deploy. They go together in about 30 to 60 minutes with minimal to no tool requirement. Our shelters have a 10-year product lifespan. They are UV coated. They're made of a material that's mold, mildew, and rot resistant, so they can be cleaned and washed and hosed out, sterilized between users. In our sites across the country, most of our residents stay anywhere from 3 to 6 months. That allows them 3 to 6 months of consistent engagement with service providers, and then they're moving on to permanent housing. To give you an example, in our site in Tacoma, which is our longest running site, it's been up for about 4.5 years. 86% of residents there have moved on to affordable housing and stayed there, which is really critical. So when we talk about data collection, we often mark someone as housed as soon as they go to housing, and then we stop tracking them for a number of reasons. I'm not really sure why that is. We have been tracking a number of our Pallet residents over time, and they are consistently remaining in housing thanks to their consistent engagement with services prior to moving on to affordable housing. So a couple other things for you to be aware of. Our units come with electrical panels, heat, air conditioning. They have a built-in ventilation system as well. They can include bunk beds. Those don't have to be included. They can be taken out, and regular freestanding beds can be used as well. That's up to our customer to decide. They have lockable doors and windows, which is critical. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. As I mentioned, it has a secure ventilation system. Really importantly, our shelters have a built-in structural floor with aluminum framing. This was intentional. We are builders, as I mentioned, so we understand that pouring foundations and ground prep can be incredibly expensive. So our goal in creating this structural floor and designing this was for these units to go right on the ground, grass, gravel, dirt, concrete. They can literally go anywhere without the need for expensive foundations. Some of our customers still choose to pour foundations, and that's fine. It just depends on what's needed to meet code requirements in each individual city. They have about 120 mile per hour wind rating. We also now have 170 mile per hour wind unit for the state of Florida and Texas for storm season. They can withstand up to 25 pounds per square foot of snow load. And they have basic standard safety features like a CO monitor, fire extinguisher, smoke detector, a secondary egress door where residents can kick the door out and leave if there's a fire in front of the door. And they're very spacious and roomy inside. So a couple important factors for success for you to be aware of. As I mentioned, the locking door is really critical for a number of reasons, but the primary reason is for our residents and the individuals who are experiencing homelessness. Many of them experience that cyclical trauma lifestyle over and over and over again while living on the streets. That can often drive people towards mental health incidences as well as substance use. And so the importance of a locking door, I cannot stress enough. There are two reasons why this is important. One is residents are more likely to accept services when they have their own space, and they have the safety of knowing that they can sleep at night behind a locked door and not worry about someone coming in on them. Often people sleeping in tents are very anxious at night. They don't sleep well. And then if they haven't slept well, then they're not, in a state the next day to engage with service providers, to get a job, to do the things that you and I might do because we're housed and we have the comfort of sleeping safely in our home. In addition to that, they feel comfortable leaving their things during the day because they can leave them behind a locking door and not worry about them being stolen. So as you've probably recognized, a lot of people that are experiencing homelessness carry their things with them. It's really hard to get a job when you have a bunch of stuff in tow behind you. And a lot of people don't want to go engage in services because they don't want to leave their stuff. So the pallet shelters allow them to leave their things comfortably, also bring pets and partners, have a different shelter experience than what they might have experienced in most congregate shelters. And what we're seeing across the country with the cities that have adopted our pallet communities is that a lot of the problematic populations that have refused services consistently or been service averse are now accepting services thanks to pallet shelters and like products that allow them their own space. So a lot of people will say, I don't want services, and we assume that means those people want to be homeless and they don't want help. That's not true. Those people do want help. They just don't want to be in a congregate shelter because they might have PTSD or be medically vulnerable or concerned about exposure to other individuals in those scenarios. So pallet shelters allow a lot of those people to come inside with confidence that they will have a safe experience. For our service providers, we're having great outcome measures and positive feedback as well. They are often using our sites, separating them into pods and organizing people by shared experience and need, which we have found that experience of community rehabilitation to be incredibly successful. We've modeled it in our nonprofit that I mentioned in Weld, and now we're seeing it in the pallet sites as well. So that's been a really positive thing for our service providers. Also, our service providers are able to find their clients every night or every day, as it were. So what we often see is, they'll make connection with a person, that person's moving from place to place for safety's sake or because they get kicked out or swept, and then the service provider can't find them. And again, that consistent engagement with the service provider is really the key to moving someone on sustainably from homelessness and keeping them out of homelessness, which is our goal. And then for communities, as Jennifer mentioned, what we're seeing is a really great, across the country, really great success rate with communities saying, wow, we were able to set up a pallet community village, clean up our streets quickly and effectively while not displacing communities that were coexisting already. And the people were accepting services, so we're able to, gain access to businesses quickly. Our sites can go up as quick as a day or sometimes, a couple months or weeks, depending on what the city requires. We have a site here in Hawaii, actually, that was set up in partnership with the National Guard and the fire department. We set up 40 shelters in 4 hours. The power was connected and the community nearby was cleaned up that same day. So we showed up on site, set up the same day, all the streets were cleaned that day and the businesses reopened and everyone was thrilled. That site is still up. We went to visit it when we got here and it looks great, going really well. So, and then of course that immediate sheltering need of getting people the services that they need. I think a lot of communities are really thrilled with the opportunity to see their streets cleaned, but also see people that need help get the help that they need rather than the typical sweeps that we usually see. So as you can see, we have sites across the country, as I mentioned, mostly focused on the West Coast here, because that's where we are and that's where most of our sphere of influence is. But we are starting to spread east onto the East Coast. We have a site that's going up actually in Richmond, Virginia, sites in Florida. We have an East Coast roadshow going on as we speak in preparation for both storm season and homelessness response. So a couple sample villages, just so you can kind of see what a pallet site looks like. So this is Los Galicos Village. This is in Sonoma County. This site's been up for just over a year, and the Sonoma County supervisors declared a state of emergency on a Friday. On Monday, their emergency management staff called me. By the Wednesday, that following Wednesday, 2 days later, we had 60 shelters on 2 trucks en route to them. And 10 days later, 60 people moved off of a trail called the Joe Rodota Trail that had been overtaken by homeless residents. 60 days later, that trail was cleared and all 60 residents went to this site. They have full-time service provision provided by St. Vincent de Paul. And the vast majority of those original 60 residents have now moved on to permanent housing and 60 more residents have moved in. One really interesting site or anecdotal story for you to know about this site is when we set this site up, there were protests, we were picketed, the media was there. This site is set up with a beautiful vineyard behind it. It's a beautiful location. directly across the street from a 55 and over residential community. That community, for very good reason, was very concerned about safety and didn't know a lot about the homeless residents that lived in their neighborhood. So they were concerned and they came and they protested. We had a lot of conversation with them as well as the service provider on site. And the county supervisors came to that community and said, we'll tell you what, we've already, bought into this site and invested a lot in making it happen. So we're going to put it up for 90 days, but the pallet shelters can be easily moved to another site. So we're going to do a vote with all of you in 90 days. And if you are still afraid and upset and it doesn't go well, we will move the site at the 90-day mark. And the residents were pleased with that. So they let it sit for 90 days. At the 90-day mark, there was a vote with that community, and the community members voted unanimously to leave this site in perpetuity, and it is still up today. The vast majority of those residents during that 90-day period, I was really proud of them, made a concerted effort to come over to the site to meet the residents there, to have conversation with them. They volunteered their time, they donated goods to the site, and they actually ended up building a number of relationships with the residents there. And there was a beautiful humanitarian story that happened where everybody got to learn and make new friends and build a new community. So it's been a wonderful site. It's still there. It will continue to be there. And they're actually adding a second site this year as well in a different location. As I mentioned before, this is Casitas de Esperanza in Santa Clara. This is our site that's totally solar powered and off the grid. They also have potable water systems because there's no water source on site, but they do have hygiene facilities, running drinking water, all of that kind of stuff, just provided through potable tanks. This is a great site that's been very successful for us as well. And we were really excited. This had our first ever 400 square foot community center, which is that picture in the bottom middle there. We set up that site on Christmas Eve with a Christmas tree and presents for the children on site. Santa came as well. So it was a really cool experience to be able to give the homeless children their Christmas experience. And it was really sweet for our staff. This is Alexandria Park in Los Angeles. This is a 100-unit facility run by an organization called Hope of the Valley. If you get a chance, you can go to our website and take a virtual tour of this site. It is really beautiful. The architects there did a really cool color scheme. All of our sites in LA have varying color schemes to them that kind of match the neighborhood, which is really neat. Not necessary, but kind of a fun thing that they wanted to do. This site has 24-hour services, hygiene facilities, mental health on site, all of that good stuff. It's been open for about a month. And there's another site nearby run by the same organization called Chandler Park. And that site's been open for about 6 months now. Sorry, 5 months. And it has also been very successful. The first wave of residents have all moved on to affordable housing now, and they're on phase 2 or round 2 of residents coming in. As I mentioned, you can go to our website, palletshelter.com/Los Angeles, and you can see all about our sites in LA. We have about 14 different sites going up there over the course of the next year, and there's kind of more coming all the time. As they identify available properties, they're adding sites, and as community adoption and neighborhood approval kind of continues to roll in, they keep adding sites in various areas of LA. If you weren't aware, there are 68,000 homeless people in the city of Los Angeles, and 48,000 of those are unsheltered, living outside under tents and tarps today. So the city of Los Angeles is under a court mandate to address their homeless crisis, and they have selected Pallet as part of the overall toolkit. They're also using hotels and a number of other opportunities, which we're very supportive of. But take a look at that site if you get a chance. It's a really cool tour. And on that same page, you'll see some resident perspectives if you want to hear input from some residents who've lived in some of our communities in LA. There's also a really cool video about our Sonoma site, our Santa Clara site, and some really boring things for me about our background that you're welcome to watch if you'd like. So with that, I will stop, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has about us.
That was fantastic, Amy. I'm going to just open up to the floor for questions. Yes, and actually, could you introduce your name just so everybody?
Sure.
Yep.
Hi, Amy. Craig Lineberry, recently retired from the police department, and I live just above the site location. You've got a lot. Well, first of all, great job with everything you're doing, and really appreciate your workforce and all that. Those are phenomenal statistics. You've got a lot of experience in different locations doing this, and the way that different deployments have put it out there and their success rates. Are we doing it right? Is there anything we should be doing better? Should we allow people to be there longer? Should we be making better improvements to the site? What should we do based on your experience to make this more successful and to really support the business community that surrounds it?
Yeah, great question. And thank you for being interested in that, because a lot of cities just put them up and don't think about that. So I'm grateful that you're asking those questions. So I will say, I think from what I know of the details with the management, which we don't take responsibility for, Everett Gospel Mission is responsible for managing your site. I think they're a great partner. I've had a lot of conversations with them and with John Hull specifically. They have spent a great deal of time working with us, learning best practices of other Pallet sites and how they've been managed. We have different management groups across the country. All of our sites have had very successful outcomes, regardless of who the site manager is. But I will say site management is a critical component. So obviously the pallet shelters are just a tool to get people to come inside and be sheltered. The success of those residents comes from the service provider, not from us. And so the service provision is really critical. It has to be available 24/7 because, as I'm sure you're aware, people have crises all day, all night. It doesn't matter. So I think that's really important. I also think security is important. And I think as far as I know, they've dealt with this, having security, not necessarily for the people outside, but for the people inside. So people often see our sites and they say, oh, good, they put security up to protect the neighborhood. That's partially true, but I think it's really important that the people inside the community feel safe and protected and like they're welcome and part of the neighborhood. And as that happens, they start to integrate in a really healthy, successful way that sort of fuels that long-term sustainable reintegration into your community as a contributing citizen instead of someone who's experiencing homelessness and sort of feels like an outsider. So we've seen that across the country as well. So that security will be helpful. And then helping the residents as they transition out find permanent housing placement that's stable, as well as job opportunities. I mean, obviously, as you can tell, we really believe in the importance of work. For people who can't work, which is, happens, then meaningful use of their time, whether it be volunteering or engaging with community in some way, reaching back into the homeless community and helping those people exit, whatever that looks like. People need a way to spend their time to build that purpose and meaning, and that keeps them on a sustainable path out of homelessness, out of addiction, out of criminal justice involvement. That's what we've seen. So luckily for you guys, we're in your town, we're hiring. We would love to take residents from the Pallet community out and give them jobs if they are able to do so and they want to come work for us. So I'm hopeful that your Pallet community is going to be successful because you have a lot of support and opportunity around, but we'll see how it goes. And our relationship with EGM will be helpful, I think, with that. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yep.
Yes, Tom.
This is a silly question, but I didn't realize that they could be painted. Do you have to use any kind of special preparation to paint them?
Yes, great question. So they're made of a material, a composite fiberglass that's similar to a boat. So we use a marine grade paint and we do have to prep the surface. What we do, we have instructions for how communities can do that themselves if they'd like to. Actually, I think it's a really great opportunity for community engagement. Like if the businesses or residents want to volunteer their time to come paint your pallet shelters, we can give you the instructions for how to do it. And it's a great way for communities to get involved. We don't do that in our shop because we're too busy producing shelters to take the time to paint them. It is a bit of a laborious process, I'll tell you that, because it's not typical construction materials, but it is possible.
Question, Amy, this is Ed Peterson. You and I have talked about a tour of your facility here in Everett.
Yep.
Which I want to do, and we talked about I could invite others. Is there a limit on how many I could bring along?
Yeah, so we would love to host anyone who'd like to come and see how we produce the shelters and meet the really valuable individuals that give us feedback and input on the design and help us build these. We do have some limitations. We don't take more than 10 people at a time just for COVID reasons. The vast majority of our staff are now vaccinated, but some are not because we don't require it. It's a choice. And so it's just up to you if you want to come to us or not. As COVID restrictions continue to lift, we might increase volume of people that are allowed, but we're happy to do kind of waves of tours, if that makes sense.
Second question, we talked about, you explained that you have worked with builders for construction sites and put up pallet shelters on building sites when they're waiting for their permits. Yep. And you can put them up quickly and take them down quickly and move them around to other sites. Have you done that very often?
Yeah, we've done it a few times. So typically we do love to partner with developers who have vacant land. It's sort of a blending of our weld housing model and pallet, which is really cool. So if there's a vacant piece of property or a property that's going to be demolished and has a really big parking lot or a big grass area, we can set up a pallet community on that site while that property is vacant and awaiting permitting, if the private landowner is willing to donate the property for use for this purpose until their permits come. The way that the weld housing program works, that legislation that we wrote allows for a property tax waiver for the landowner if they donate their property for use to address housing, or excuse me, to address homelessness while that property is vacant. One of your county council members, Nate Naring, helped me extend that benefit into Snohomish County. So that exists today by my understanding. So if there were Snohomish County developers or private landowners that had property that they wanted to donate for a pallet site or weld housing, they would get that same property tax waiver for that period of time that the property is in donated status. And then the service provider takes responsibility for the residents when the developer's ready to build the property and their permits break. So the residents then move either to a new pallet site or onto permanent housing. The units come apart even faster than they go together. So they're all panelized, as you saw. We can just pull them apart, pull the pins, take them down and set them up on a new site, or they're very lightweight. We can also fork them onto a flatbed trailer if it's just going down the road, and then unload them and set them down in a new location. Very simple. So we're happy to help coordinate those opportunities if they come available as well.
Amy, I know you have a hard stop right at 1:30, so I want to thank you for your amazing presentation and your amazing work that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our last presenter is Councilmember Roberts, who serves on the Sound Transit Board. And a little over a month ago in April, we had Sound Transit present to us an update on their realignment planning for ST3. And we got the agency perspective. It's a little old now, I guess a month or two now, but I wanted to make sure we had a perspective of our board and our champion for better transit in the county, be able to provide his perspective and maybe kind of the road for, or the light rail forward for the realignment process. So thank you, Councilmember.
Anytime I get near a computer, it sometimes starts to hiccup, so hopefully that won't happen. It's Brock, Ed, thanks for inviting me to the semi-annual meeting, and I'm really happy to be here. Also really excited to hear the presentations from Amy, as well as from Garry and from Jennifer. I did have a chance to tour the facility, the pallet housing facility, a while ago, and it's really impressive. So hope you'll get that chance. I'm going to touch, kind of walk through at a pretty high level what's going on at Sound Transit insofar as realignment is concerned. So let me back up to early part of 2020 when COVID hit. As most of you know, or maybe most of you know, Sound Transit has a couple of funding sources, but primarily it's sales tax driven. So once COVID hit, just like lots of other jurisdictions, it just became a free fall in terms of revenue. In addition to the revenue impacts, there were significant impacts associated with responding to COVID. So as a public transit agency, the agency was responsible for protecting the health and safety of both the employees as well as the riders. And as COVID advanced, in many areas in the district, within the taxing district, which I think everyone understands covers Pierce, parts of Pierce, parts of King, and parts of Snohomish, the kind of the core urban center. So the riders that were on Sound Transit, using Sound Transit as ridership tanked overall. And Tom Hinkson knows something about this for Everett Transit as well, because this profile that I'm describing is consistent with all the transit agencies that serve the Puget Sound region, and for that matter, all transit agencies that were hit by COVID. So ridership tanked, revenue tanked, but the people who were using Sound Transit were the people who had to get to wherever they were. They were first, in many cases, were first responders. So we had both a dramatic revenue decline and a cost increase associated with making the riders as safe as possible. So that was the case. How about if I move there? Does that help? Oh my gosh, I don't want us to look at this person. I don't know why you would. But so that was the first cost impact. The second cost impact came as a bit of a surprise, but thinking that this was March, April, where we began to take, the agency rather, began to take significant steps to reduce that, if you will, financial bleeding. The second cost impact became a bit of a surprise because unlike other kinds of recessions, this particular COVID recession, at least in the Pacific Northwest Puget Sound region, did not have a significant downturn in real estate prices. So all of a sudden there was a double hit on Sound Transit's revenue and expenditure, remembering that Sound Transit, and maybe you may not be aware of this, but Sound Transit is the largest transit expansion program in the nation right now. And so the hit on the real estate in particular first, and then later on cost of materials and construction became a giant hit. So I think the maximum number of those two, as we began, this was being accounted for in the fourth quarter of 2020. And that impact, the combination of those two over the course of the project, all of the construction approved under ST3 was about just south of $12 billion. And of course, that wasn't a problem 12 months prior. So that's the kind of dramatic impact that took place. The agency, the board, approved several measures in June of 2020, just about a year ago. And those measures were first a resolution that said we need to take a look at what our revenue options are and be as aggressive as we can in trying to seek additional revenue, primarily from the federal government, but from other sources as well, before we go to making changes and cuts. The second resolution talked about how to prioritize that, and without going into too much detail, because I will come back to the key priorities. Those key priorities are ridership, connecting the centers in the Puget Sound region, socioeconomic equity, and building the spine. Now, there are some other parts of that, but unless you have questions, I won't go into those. Those are the four key priorities that were identified by the board for what realignment would look like. Now, the board's policies that were adopted in ST3 required that if the projects are, if the ST3 package cannot be realized in terms of the revenue changes, then realignment must take place. There's a set of board policies as to how that must happen. And that's what the board is doing now. An additional action that the board took, I think technically we may have taken it early in the first quarter of this year, but it was really developed in 2020. And that was to have an independent review of the costs associated with building the projects. So ST3, the ST3 projects, and actually not just ST3, but ST2 projects, all writ large, all of the Sound Transit capital projects underwent an independent third-party review for cost. And that work is ongoing. So it wasn't a one-time review. It is work that continues as we speak to take a look at cost and cost management. We'll tell you in summary, the response from the independent third-party review, and some of you do projects know what value engineering is. This is essentially a financial version of value engineering. The independent review confirmed that the numbers were accurate, that the procedures were appropriate. In other words, the costs were real. There wasn't, I think it's fair to say there is not, in terms of the projects approved and under construction, there isn't dramatic savings to be found. There isn't something wrong so much as there is a reality in terms of funding issues. So the third piece of this then in the realignment is, how do we look as a board, how do we look at addressing essentially cost, scope, and timing? And those are the levers. I mean, we can get into a lot of detail, but the reality is that those are the levers. We can stretch out time, we can change the scope, or we can get rid of projects or substantially reduce the project load. And so those are the levers that the board is now considering for realignment. That process is scheduled to come to some kind of resolution at next month's board meeting. So there's been a lot of discussion. I'm happy to answer questions about it, but there's been a lot of discussion about whether we should delay those decisions or not. But there is so I think of them in terms of buckets that we need to manage. There's a revenue bucket in terms that's driven by COVID. There's a cost bucket in terms of the project management, that is to say, real estate costs, labor costs, and materials costs. And that last one is spiking now again. And then there are the additional scope issues. And those have manifested themselves at least in two of the project areas, one of them being West Seattle and one of them being Ballard. So that is over and above and beyond what we're dealing with the ST3 package. Now, just for purposes of context, ST2 and the projects under ST2 are under construction and are not part of the review for realignment. That is to say, south to Federal Way, east to Bellevue, and north to Linwood are under contract and are not, there may be some changes in some cost issues, but effectively those have been set aside to say, no, the board has said, no, that's under construction. We're not going to change those projects. We're not going to change those contracts significantly or substantially. What we're going to do is look at the extensions from Federal Way to Tacoma, from Linwood to Everett, and I think there are some small costs associated with the east side, not a lot. And then there is the 405 bus rapid transit system, the BRT system. So those are the things that are being, in the big picture sense, lots of details. There's about 29 projects altogether that are being contemplated as part of the realignment. Now, there's an 18-member board, 3 of which are from Snohomish County. I'm happy to answer questions about some of that details, but I think every one of you is capable of doing the math in terms of the challenges we have and the structure of sound transit and sub-area equity. It is a problem that is just simply something we have to try to address. And I've made no bones about it. This board member is not a fan of sub-area equity. That's a different question. What's before us now is what to do in the face of those revenue and cost challenges. Now, the Snohomish County board members, in addition to myself, are, as I think you know, County Executive Dave Summers and Linwood Mayor Nicholas Smith. And I really don't like to speak for any other people, and I particularly don't like to speak for other elected officials because it tends to not go so well. But I think what I'm about to tell you, I can say with confidence, is the position of the 3 Snohomish County board members. And it is to build the spine. I in particular have worked, but my colleagues have supported entirely to point out that decarbonizing the transportation system is one of the most significant things we can do, and doing it as quickly as possible is critical to address climate change in addition to the transportation needs of the region. That means that ridership, connecting the centers, building the spine, and socioeconomic equity, which the board has already said through their resolutions are the priorities. Those priorities are also surrogates for addressing climate change and decarbonizing the system. And I say with some pride that Sound Transit is now operating on essentially 100% free carbon energy. So it is the best system in the country right now in that area, and we need to continue to do that work. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. I don't think there's any way we can avoid some costs, some time delays, but we're trying to make sure that that system gets built as quickly as possible. It was originally intended to build a spine connection between the key centers in the region. And that's its mission. And the 3 board members from Snohomish County have been pushing on that. Then this afternoon, I'll have yet another meeting because these are long and intense meetings. I'm the vice chair of the board, and that means that I am in the room in a working group that's trying to come up with some of these strategies. I can tell you there is not unanimity among the board group. So I'll stop there. Happy to answer questions. It's very much a work in progress. And the 3 board members from Snohomish County are working just as hard as we can to try to realize the promise that was made when we brought this proposal to the voters. And should I just call? I don't know how. I want to make sure that I'll try to repeat questions as they come up. But I saw Ty, you first, and then Charles.
Hi. Thanks for the presentation. The urbanist raised this really tantalizing possibility of bypassing the Boeing reroute and going straight up I-5, which would, and then having a spur to go, what's the name, South 522, to go out to Boeing. That could either be bus rapid transit in the short term, and then maybe a light rail spur that connects at I-5, which would save millions of dollars, would dramatically increase the timeline and make the trip shorter to Everett, from Everett to southward destinations. Is that something that's potentially on the table?
So the question is there an opportunity to bypass the area that goes to Southwest Everett, the industrial center in Southwest Everett? And the answer is no. That's not that's not what the voters approved. 2, if we're trying to move people in the region and connect them to job centers, that doesn't do it. 3, when you get north of 128th, very few people live east of I-5. The population of Snohomish County is all to the west. So if we want to serve that area, the system that we have is the best way to do that. And last but not least, to build another, there's no funding source to build another spur, and there's no way of putting that in anything that would happen within the next 20 to 30 years. And so if you're going to compete on ridership, if you're going to compete on decarbonizing the system, then you have to connect it to where people are. And that's the system. And lastly, that's what the voters approved. And so making that change requires a very different kind of process, even legally as well as financially. We would not compete as well with the systems in Seattle, which may be one of the reasons why that concern is coming from there as well as elsewhere. Charles.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to ask about the possibility of an additional ballot measure coming sometime this decade, if whether the Sound Transit Board had any discussions about the potential need for that due to
So the question is there any discussion among the board about an additional ballot measure? Not really. That doesn't mean that the folks are insensitive to that, but the reality is that the way ST3 was structured, there's a commitment to build it and the taxes remain in place until the ST3 system is built. So that's where the extension of time is one option. I will speak for myself on this, but I have long said that the state needs to start looking at a very different package. And that package would be, for the purposes of illustration, Olympia to Mount Vernon. And that's part of what the higher capacity, high speed rail systems are looking at. But there isn't a serious discussion. In fact, I'm not aware of any discussion right now. Frankly, all of the energy in the room is spent right now on trying to figure out what to do with the shortfall. The good news is that we've gone, just because of the economy, from 11.5 billion, I think was the one number, we're just south of 8 billion right now. So there has been some improvement, but it's still real money.
I have a question on Zoom.
Oh, okay. Let's see here. No one usually lets me touch a computer, so let's see.
Go ahead, Mara. I think you're.
Hi, am I the only question? Is it from me? Can you hear me?
We can.
You can. Oh, good. Hi. I just was wondering if there was any ability to develop a private partnership, if any of the major corporations in the region could be approached with helping with that shortfall, or if anybody is stepping up to kind of maybe see if some of the bigger regional people could help with that.
I don't think there's anything that prohibits it. And at least on the east side, there's been some contribution made by Microsoft in helping do some of the additional work in Redmond. That has typically been for improvements over and above what was approved by the voters. So I don't think it's prohibited. There are some challenges to doing that, but it's not prohibited. And then something I didn't mention because of time is that Sound Transit is deeply engaged in transit-oriented development. And so the housing component is a place where that work has been, has involved a lot of private sector money combined with public sector money to build housing, particularly around the station areas. And yesterday there was an announcement by Amazon, and I think there's $100 million being put into TOD efforts into the systems that are under construction. So there, yes, but it would be the answer to that. But it's not prohibited, and it is something that's being looked at. It's just that there's some, without going into details, there are some very challenging mechanisms to do that. And Washington State is one of the most difficult. Washington State is the most difficult state in the union to be able to combine public and private dollars because of Article 8, Section 7 of the Constitution, which simply has a pretty strict prohibition in some of those in that regard. I think.
I'm Megan Dunn, Snohomish County Council. So just a reminder, the ballot measure, did it include that it would be built by 2036? So we voted to have it here by 2036.
Yes and no. That is what was in the ballot, but within the details of that, there are financial considerations that allow that to. So the commitment is to build this system, but by this time was what was on the ballot. That's absolutely true. But within the provisions that are in the finer print of that, those timeframes are our best guess, and so.
So part of that is also, so the cost is increasing, and I thought the estimate, you said 8 billion, I thought it was closer to 5, but the majority of those cost increases are in West Seattle and Ballard. So if our line was independent, would we have to do the realignment if majority of the costs are not on our line?
There's some complexities to that, but the simple answer is it's not just our line, it's a system. And so essentially the assets are fungible. But that brings up one of the issues that I've been raising for years. If the assets are fungible, how is it that we would determine what does or doesn't get built on the basis of sub-area equity? or to put another finer point on it, when we issue bonds, we don't issue bonds to sub areas, we issue bonds to a system, and their obligations of the whole system. So I do think that's a great question. However, there's a distinction between some, that's why I pointed out that there are cost additions, meaning over and above what was approved in ST3 for West Seattle and Ballard, whether it's tunneling or whatever that may be. Those are being looked at separately. That's a separate question. So I want to be clear that the cost that overruns, or I'm sorry, these are not cost overruns because we haven't estimated the projects. They're cost escalations in the estimates themselves. Very few of these projects are beyond 10% design. So they're not, but they are cost increases based on the estimates. And some of those are on what was approved in ST3. Some of them would be additions over and above that cost number that I've provided.
Just tell us how to advocate that.
Well, that's, you know, and I know it looks like I'm getting the hook here, but I just want to say thanks, and I'm happy to have further discussions on this as all three of your Snohomish County board members are. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, a lot of content today. I want to take just the next 3 or 4 or 5 minutes and ask you as members if there are topics you would like us to, your board of directors to be looking at and working on during the next 6 months. This is your time to input on that. We've allowed very little time with all the great content we just had for a verbal discussion of this, but either a comment now, a request, a suggestion, or email to Brock at the or note on the website. Some input electronically would also be fine. But does anybody have a suggestion or a request of a topic that you think you'd like to hear more about? Should we have a workshop on something? Should we have a board discussion on a topic? Open forum for any input along those lines.
We have a chat submission on Zoom from Laura. She says she would like continued updates on the light rail alignment.
Okay, let's make a note of that one.
And how does the expansion of years go with how the Everett Station District Alliance does their work? You know, it's coming in at 36 or 41. I mean, it's a pretty big deal. So how do we get it to change? Figure it out, Ed and board.
Are you? I'll raise a few $1 billion. We should be able to give at least some information by the end of
Are you also suggesting that we advocate for a certain outcome that might affect the timeline to Everett? I'm not sure what that would be.
Yes.
Because we could bring that up in the July discussion, and Councilmember Roberts didn't quite get there, but there's this big question that's on the table for the board of whether to make a decision at the July meeting or to delay the decision some sort of way. And so there might be a window for us to continue to shape that.
There absolutely is an opportunity to input, and the 3 board members from Snohomish County and others are saying we should be making these decisions now. And frankly, think policy.
Tom.
I think we'll have a few months with Pallet, and I think some success stories from that. I'm expecting success stories we should be able to sell.
So think about celebrating them during the 1-year demonstration period. Sheldon, I wanted you were out when I did the kudos to you for donating space today. Thank you for being our sponsor. And
maybe we can get an update on the parking. What's going on with the parking? Update of the city as to changing streets to 4 hours, no overnights, or what's really going on
In the city or in the neighborhood?
in our neighborhood. What's going on.
Okay, we could have potentially a forum on that or a report on that or, okay. Other topics.
Paula on Zoom also says she'd love to hear a 6-month update on the pallet shelter.
Okay. We will plan on that for the annual meeting, which is usually the second Thursday, December. Is there anybody, oh, so you're monitoring the online and any other comments? Seeing Gretchen here, Gretchen represents Kaiser Permanente, one of the projects that is doing a major development in the neighborhood. It might be of interest to our membership to get an update at some point on your plan, if you have renderings and timing and any other thoughts about neighborhood development from the Kaiser Permanente perspective. So I'll put that on the list. Liz?
Okay. So I keep hearing you say this neighborhood, and it's not one of the 19 neighborhoods in the city. So maybe bringing that forward to the city and asking for that recognition, and then maybe also getting a liaison assignment to the neighborhood.
Great comment, and it's something of concern that just redistricting of council seats will make a difference, because then we'll have specific elected officials to relate to. But this is a commercial neighborhood, which is different than residential neighborhoods, and I think some thought needs to go into how we most effectively interface with city administration in representing neighborhood development. So that's a good comment. Thank you. Anybody else? We have in the convergence study created a master plan concept that brings innovation as a centerpiece for the development of the neighborhood. And I was thinking as we had the Pallet report that the innovation going on there is not just about a project in Everett. It's about the potential for replicating that model throughout the city and throughout the county. And so to the degree that we are host, in a sense, to a demonstration project of that type, it's got huge potential. Same thing with climate action initiatives that could be done here in this neighborhood as a part of our thinking about what this neighborhood ought to be by 2036 when light rail gets here. There are a variety of other elements in business development and in equity framework and in other elements that are going on and going to be prominent in this neighborhood that could be a part of an identity, a brand, an innovative ecosystem kind of community. We have that kind of potential here. So I think maybe that's some work that could be done in the next 6 months to bring forward some ideas on an innovative zone conceptualization for this neighborhood. All right, let me think. Is there anything else, Brock, for the good of the order? It is 2 o'clock. I think I want to adjourn right here, but you get the last word.
This is good. Pay your dues if you haven't. And we look forward to seeing you virtually, unfortunately, probably mostly over the next 6 months. But some of you